Hello, everyone. Welcome again to our broadcast today. I last week discussed the importance of having a spiritual uh, freedom. We talked about that it's important for us to have a solid foundation, and I talked about so many areas that we're going to be covering. I'm taking a break from that today to give a personal experience, and I hope it will be beneficial to you as you listen. The focus is really God's faithfulness, that God is worthy to be trusted. About 4 years ago, October 19th, 2018, by all accounts and purposes, would have been the day I died. Here in Nashville, we had an event. My father-in-law had passed away in Nigeria, and we were having a wake keep for him. We had friends and family come together to celebrate the life of my father-in-law. And so we had a lot of people, maybe about, I would say maybe 150 people were there. And my father-in-law was a professor in physics at University of Ibadan in Nigeria. So he taught a lot of whether people who went to engineering school or medical school or people who studied science, many of them passed through him. He was in the university. He came there as a student in 1948 and was living in Ibadan up to the time of his death in 2018. So when he passed, we decided to celebrate him and have a little wake-up for him here in Nashville. So considering that I run my business in Nigeria, at the time of his death, I was in Nigeria, and I came back to be a part of that celebration. So, on the day of this celebration, I didn't feel any different. I wasn't sick in any form or shape. So, the program had it that a lot of people who knew him came to talk about their interaction with him and the kind of person he was. And it was my turn to talk about him. So I stood up to talk about my father-in-law. I started with telling them how I met my wife and the first time when I called her house because they lived on campus. University of Ibadan has residential quarters for their professors, and my wife's parents lived in on campus. So at the time, I was a student, and my wife also was a student, and both of us were part of a Christian group called Ibadan Varsity Christian Union, or IVC. So I called her house because at that time I had noticed that I was interested to get more information about her. So when I called, her father was the one who picked the phone. So I was telling people this story, how I met my wife and we were all having fun and people were laughing, and suddenly I couldn't hear myself anymore. And I was like, what is going on here? So I kind of stopped talking And I was trying to find out what's going on. So I stopped a little bit, but after I started talking again, and I had to stop. I had very, very severe headache. When I stopped, I had a microphone, so I gave the microphone to the MC of the event, and I went to the table where my wife was. I told her, I said, honey, call the ambulance. Something definitely is wrong with me. A lot of doctors were in there because my wife is a physician, so her classmates and some of her workmates were there. So a lot of them said, "Oh no, he's just restless. Calm him down, and maybe he will be okay." My wife called the ambulance. So you can imagine we are the people who have invited this everyone, and here I am. The ambulance comes, and I didn't know the danger that I was in. So the ambulance, as they were taking me out of the hall, I told people, I said, I'm sorry that this is happening. I need to go to the hospital to check out what is going on with me. We get to the hospital, and my wife is telling them, scan his brain. I'm suspecting something may be going on with his brain. And they were arguing with my wife. They said, no, there is no need for his brain to be scanned. He's just stressed. Let's just give him some medication and he will be fine. My wife said, no, scan his brain. So it took another physician. My wife called in another physician to come in to convince them to scan my brain. So they took me to the radiology department, scanned my brain, and it wasn't conclusive what was going on. They took me back and scanned my brain now with dye. They injected me with some dye. With that, they saw I had bleed in my brain, or what they call subarachnoid hemorrhage. So I had a ruptured brain vessel, or ruptured aneurysm, they call it. I have never heard of aneurysm in my life. When the second result came in, I heard my wife ask them, is there a midline shift? And they said no. And I turned to my wife and said, what's going on? What do they mean? My wife said, don't worry, you are okay. I did not know that aneurysm, when you have a ruptured aneurysm, most of the time, the people die at that point where the aneurysm occurred. And a lot of people also die in the hospital. Even though they have reached the hospital, they still die in the hospital. So God gave my wife grace. She knew the implications, to be calm, to have peace. So me, I didn't know what was going on. I, at this point, was going in and out of consciousness. The hospital they took me to didn't have a neurosurgeon, didn't have the facility to do what was needed, the surgery that was needed. So they now rushed me to another hospital where they did surgery. And my wife told me that she had to sign because they told her that they may not be able to reach the point where I had the ruptured vessel, and I could die from the surgery and all sorts. She signed. A lot of people from my church, Bethel Ward Outreach Church in Nashville, the pastor, a lot of people, they really were praying for me. And I did not know how much danger I was in. I woke up the next day and I saw my sister in the room. I was unhappy with my wife. I was like, why did my wife call my sister to come all the way from out of town, out of state, to come to see me? That she's making a big deal out of this. My sister, who is an intensive care nurse and a nurse practitioner, she kept quiet and was looking at me. So she started, at the time my wife wasn't in the room, she started telling me what happened. And I told her, I said, sister, it looks like you're describing as if I had a stroke. She said, no, you did not have a stroke. You had the worst kind of stroke. So I was there every 1 hour. I was in intensive care unit, neuro intensive care unit. Every 1 hour they came, checked my blood pressure. I was on medication every hour because I had the possibility of having a stroke while in hospital, and that could be fatal. Again, I was unaware of the danger. I wasn't feeling. I was feeling okay when I woke up the next day. So I didn't like that they wouldn't let me sleep. Every hour they will check my blood pressure. Every hour they come to ask me who is the president, just to make sure that I'm still conscious. After 2 or 3 days, I told my wife, I said, honey, I'm going to discharge myself against medical advice because I do not really appreciate what's going on here. And at the time, of course, I'm running my business in Nigeria and I'm in the ICU and I'm telling my wife what to write to respond to emails. It was funny. The nurses we are looking at. Who is this guy that is still trying to walk while he's in neuro ICU? They had to bring the neurosurgeon to come in to talk to me. And when the guy came in, he said, sir, we understand that you're concerned about your stay here. I said, yes. He said, where do you think you are? I said, I know I'm in the hospital. He said, listen, what happened to you? 50% of the people immediately die. And you have survived and you're concerned that we are not letting you to sleep and all that. Let me tell you, you're going to be here for 21 days because you have a very, very serious issue, which we need to monitor and be sure that you're fine. It was at that point that I began to maybe realize the danger I was in. Thank God I wasn't in the hospital for 21 days. After 11 days, they released me to go home. And they gave me some literature to read. When I got home, I started looking through this literature. I got very, very scared. I'm like, this is what happened to me? In fact, I stopped reading them. I trashed them because they started building fear in me. So it was when I went to see my primary care physician, and my wife wrote some things for me to give him when I went to see him. After he read what happened to me, because apart from that first and second day, I have never had any issue. Most of the people who have aneurysms that had ruptured, most of them will die instantly. If they didn't die, they are going to be paralyzed. If they are not paralyzed, they are going to constantly have severe headache. They may lose speech. All sorts of neurological deficits. But here I am with nothing, absolutely no defect. My primary care physician looked at me. This is a guy who studied mathematics before he went to medical school. He says, sir, do you know that it's only 0.01% of the population that have the kind of result you have? It was that instance that I began to realize the magnitude of what God has done. So I stand here today to say that God is faithful. God has been faithful to me. I stand here today to say that God is worthy to be trusted, that you can depend on Him. When I was going through all these issues, the truth is, I was not even praying. I was not conscious to pray for myself. A lot of people, of course, were praying for me. And God, in His infinite mercy, saved my life. And that's the testimony I have today. That God, whatever you are going through, you can trust Him. That God is faithful. That there is nothing that is difficult with Him. There is nothing He cannot do. It doesn't matter what the statistics is. If they had shown me that statistics before I had this, I would have concluded that there is no way I would survive this. But look at me. Not only did I survive, I am thriving. I don't have a single defect, not a single one. And so I give God the glory. I give Him the praise. And the challenge I have to you, the listener, is what is that you're going through? What is that difficulty that you're currently experiencing? God is God. There is nothing difficult with Him. He can do all things. Trust Him and see what He will do in your situation. Thank you.